You might have seen the Sony Xperia Z in a previous review, but did you know that it has a smaller twin? It may not have all of the abilities of its bigger brother, but the good news is it is still a great little device to own. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is the Sony Xperia ZL. For the most part, the Xperia ZL is every bit the same phone as the Xperia Z, just a little smaller and missing a couple of the flagship phone's unique features. Design is the first thing you'll see with this phone. It isn't the completely glass-encased body of the Z, though the front is still in keeping with the rectangular shape with angular corners. The very same 5-inch display makes a return here, but the body around it has been shrunken down. And that's a very good thing. The front is completely black, with nothing but the Sony logo and the front-facing camera down on the lower right corner. But more on that in a bit. The button layout is different here, but retains that large, sturdy silver power button. It feels really nice and is a good centerpiece for both of Sony's flagship devices. The volume rockers are above the silver this time, but there is also the addition of a dedicated camera button. The sides are about the same as found on the Z, completely flat, making the grip on the sides just as easy. Coming around the back, the ZL does away with the glass and instead has a textured plastic. There is a little give if you really press down on the material, but it shouldn't really pose any problems. It looks nice and actually helps the feel of the phone. Glass phones sometimes slip about in the hand, but that is not an issue here. At the bottom is the only real eyesore in the form of a small flappy cover. It is important in that it houses the micro SIM and micro SD slots, and while I don't really think it's very particularly ugly, it is held by just one piece of elastic. Now, you shouldn't be opening it up too often anyway, but some care might still be needed to ensure it doesn't break off. As far as the feel in the hand, it is really pretty brilliant. 5-inch displays are awesome, as I have been convinced of recently, but as the phones get bigger, they get harder to handle in one hand. A Note 2 or Optimus G Pro might not be much bigger than the Xperia Z, but it still makes a difference, and honestly, I'm just not used to it. But to take a 5-inch screen and make the body as slim as possible benefits the handling greatly. The smaller the bezels get, the more attractive these larger screens will be because they won't take as long to get used to. The Xperia ZL and, mind you, the upcoming Samsung Galaxy S4 is a great example of this. I personally think that it's a perfect middle ground and is a strong suit for this phone. As I mentioned before, you get mostly the same bits with the Xperia ZL as its slightly bigger brother. This is true for the screen. You get the same TFT capacitive screen that is 5 inches large and displays 1080p resolution with 441 ppi. The sharpness is still great, while the Bravia engine built-in makes this display look like a tiny Sony TV. But it does suffer from the same problems as the Xperia Z. All of that glory is hindered by bad viewing angles. Put the phone at an angle and the display loses a lot of clarity and fidelity. The best way to view this screen is dead on, and when you do so, I'll admit that it is still a great experience. Performance should be the same in the ZL as in the Z, and that is pretty much the story here. The Xperia ZL packs the same 1.5 GHz Snapdragon S4 Pro processor backed by the Adreno 320 GPU and 2 GB of RAM. As far as benchmarks go, the scores are quite literally the same, with the ZL also scoring just over 20,000 in Antutu benchmark like the Z did. The performance is great as a result, even if this processor package is getting on a little bit. However, the Xperia Z and ZL are great examples of how the S4 Pro is still a great performance option and should still stand the test of time. As was the case with the Xperia Z, there are a few different versions available that are capable of LTE and then some that are only for HSDPA networks. Take care when ordering in your region so that you don't get a version that won't work on your network. Mine works just fine on the T-Mobile HSPA Plus network. Now, I was unhappy with the speaker found on the Xperia Z with its very tinny and shallow sound profile, but at least the now rear-facing speaker is a little bit of an improvement, even if not by too much. Battery life does have a small difference in the ZL, in that it has a 2370 mAh unit inside, 40 mAh over that found in the Xperia Z. Don't get your hopes up though, that minimal increase doesn't seem to really increase the general lifespan. Looping a video gave Me the same 5.5 hours, and if the reports on the Xperia Z are any indication, this phone will have a good amount of talk time otherwise and a lot of standby time. So it is still the same kind of mixed bag that the battery in the Z was. There are power savings options like stamina mode, which turns off mobile data when the screen is off, so that can all help you extend your time. The Xperia UI is a melting pot of design elements and functionality, but I think it works very well. Sony included the slightly outdated Jelly Bean 4.1.2, but opted for design elements that look a lot like Ice Cream Sandwich. It is simple but elegant, and doesn't sacrifice features like Google Now and Sony's own Walkman application, which is a neat music player. Lastly, there are the small apps that overlay a small application over what you're doing for further multitasking. The Xperia UI impressed by being easy on the eyes but is still very usable. And finally, there are the cameras. So, that 2-megapixel front-facing camera on the lower right corner might seem a little weird, but apparently there is a reason for it. When video chatting, Sony found that people tend to look lower on the screen, well below where typical front-facing cameras are located. So, the camera placement will make you seem like you're actually looking at your caller, and thus make things feel a little bit more natural. I've yet to test it, but let's be honest. Do you ever really care where the other person on the line is looking? On the other hand, the rear camera is the same 13-megapixel Exmor RS shooter that produces very nice shots. Picture quality is more than adequate, though the typical issues with low-light situations continue here. The flash diode does a good job, however, of filling the scene without blowing out the details. The app shows Sony's experience with cameras with the inclusion of Superior Auto, which automatically sets the appropriate scene for what is in the frame. After that, you have the full HD video camera, burst, and sweeping panorama modes for some extra fun. And so, there you have it. It might set you back at least $700 American unlocked, but the Xperia ZL takes the already pretty beloved Xperia Z and puts it into a smaller, more accessible package, which is, in my opinion, its strongest suit. Sure, you might not have water resistance in this different body, but if that isn't a big deal to you, then you have a great alternative to the slightly larger Xperia Z. It feels very nice in the hand, while being one of the fastest current phones that brings the increasingly popular 5-inch 1080p display. Viewing angles aside, which I and a number of people honestly don't care as much about, there was a lot to love about the Xperia Z, and with the ZL, I think I might have found my favorite phone so far of 2013. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because Android Authority is your source for all things Android.